A lot of times I like to talk about and think about the state of different markets and where they are, and related to, and even before I got into the magazine business, I would look at the health of magazines that reflected a particular market or industry. And it's often interesting to look at market dynamics and see where things are going and whether there's a lot of interest in a market or whether it's pretty stagnant and mature, and we have to relate in a different way. Hi, this is Gary. Thoughts on the manufacturing, automation, and control technology market. And this podcast is brought to you with support from Inductive Automation. Discover a whole new view with Ignition 8 by Inductive Automation. It's packed with features for the modern control system like unlimited licensing, high-powered tags, and a mobile-first flexible design environment for all devices. Ignition 8 supports enterprises of any size. See all Ignition has to offer at inductiveautomation.com. My thanks to this longtime sponsor, and I see that they are to Ignition 8.1.14 as they just keep improving the process. And starting out as like HMI SCADA database, talking about Internet of Things added onto it, and those things all relate together anyway. So anyway, check out Inductive Automation, interesting company. And I'll be glad when maybe this year in 2022, we can actually all gather together and meet at their Ignition community conference. So what started my thinking on this, I've been thinking for quite a while. Sometimes I think about these podcasts and sometimes I think too long. That goes with being an Enneagram 5, I guess. And so I think about it and I don't record. That's why the last podcast I said I'd written down several podcasts. I just never did it. Sometimes you just have to pull the trigger, I guess. Anyway, thinking about the market and what jogged this series of thoughts came from the annual ARC advisory group listing along with Control magazine of the automation top 50 in terms of sales in the US and globally. And I always look at that with a lot of interest and see what the heck is going on in the market. And it suddenly dawned on me what there's not a lot of movement in those top ratings. I can look at that top 50, and the main thing, I look at the top 5 and it's almost always the same. And not to necessarily knock any of those companies, but kind of like, is there any movement in the market? And what I see is kind of the main thing is companies adding to the top 50 or adding to their ranking a little bit. It's acquisition. There are quite a few companies that have been acquiring smaller companies and sometimes a little bit bigger companies, and they grow and they grow and they grow. And they get into the top 50 and maybe even the top 20 along the way, or maybe even a little bit higher than that. And it's an acquisition thing. And then you look at the top automation companies that you would expect to see at the top, I guess, and where they're going a lot of times with their innovation and growing and so on is also acquisitions. More companies get acquired. They want to grow into a market. Some of the more interesting things is Rockwell becoming more and more of a software company. Something that I remember talking to a CEO quite some time ago, and being an old-time Allen Bradley Rockwell person, saying, well, you know, there's software in all our hardware, but that doesn't make you a software company. But under the current regime, a lot of things, the senior executive ranks are amazing at Rockwell now, the way they've brought in outside people. Usually they would bring in one, they didn't fit in and they would leave. And now they have several, and even some software hands coming in, and some security people, internet software security types. And so interesting things there, but rather than buy everything, they just invested in PTC, another interesting company that acquired ThingWorx and Kepware, and started an IoT division, and then further acquisitions for augmented reality. and now they're starting to talk as being a metaverse company. Um, First company in this market, that, to me anyway, that mentioned the word metaverse. But anyway, another acquisition kind of thing. And Rockwell just made an investment and then a partnership with PTC for the ThingWorks stuff, which augmented Rockwell's software without needing to actually hire and manage that sort of development, which I thought was interesting and also smart. So anyway, looking down the list, I'm not going to like read the list to you, but just go. You could check out Control Magazine for this global top 50, and go back and look and see, how there really hasn't been a lot of movement. Now that begs a question: if there's not a lot of movement, is it a relatively stagnant market, or maybe it's a mature market? For control and automation, it is really hard to switch. If I'm already Honeywell, Emerson, Yokogawa, ABB user, or what would now be Schneider, Foxborough kind of thing, if I'm already using those, to switch out is really, really difficult. And even PLCs, early in my career, I was selling a particular brand of PLCs, and the target I was given, I didn't get to choose, and I was given a target account that was all brand M, and I was selling brand A. And basically, the plant manager said to me, I said, Gary, this is the fact of life. I have 100 electricians in this plant. They're all trained in brand M, the competitor. And if I even brought in one PLC on one machine that's yours, because of the way the plant operates, it would be in one area. So just the electricians in that area would be trained. But weekends, overtimes, other things could happen. And any electrician from anywhere else in the plant might be assigned to look over that line. And so that means I would have to train every one of my electricians. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And that's PLCs. Consider, the life of PLC is the life of a machine, but even bringing in a new machine now was a problem for me, selling a certain kind of thing. If I'm in process control where, the process is going to last a really long time, and an upgrade is quite frankly painful, that turnover chance is pretty rare. So you have to start looking for greenfield opportunities, and there have been few of those in the United States, and not all that many around the world, quite frankly. So I don't know. Maybe that leads to a certain maturity, stability in the rankings. If one company develops something, they all kind of develop it, and so I think from a technology standpoint, it probably pains the CTOs of the different companies to hear this, but at what point does somebody have such a great superior technology advantage that everybody's going to run to it? And trust me, I have talked to many CEOs of startup companies, and it's like, it is so great, and we do this and this and this, and they can't do that, and brand S and brand R and brand, whatever brand, they can't do it. But I'd say, how are you going to sell it? How are you going to get it in? It might be great, but you just have to find a niche. And maybe the best one I've found on that is, you get like a company like Beckhoff that's really strong in certain kinds of machines, and has found a really good niche, and all their products gel for those, and that's fantastic. As far as knocking off Siemens, and another one would be Bedrock Automation with its open secure system, and it's got all kinds of really cool stuff built in. Probably not going to knock off Rockwell in a lot of places, but on the other hand, it's really strong in certain niche markets where all of its features really play well, and they cut the proper time of the market to sell into there, and so they're doing okay. Last I heard, pre-pandemic, I guess, or something like that. So looking at all that, I did some research, market research, custom for a company in the process sensor area. And I already knew quite a bit, but you do the research to get more numbers and more backing and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of like, oh, that market, that's been so consolidated that, I told the company I was consulting with, look somewhere else, for this particular strategy. And I wasn't even sure about their strategy, but it was several years ago, and I'm not going to tell who it was. But anyway, it's I was thinking you really should consult with me on your strategy rather than just figuring out which one of these companies to acquire or whatever. So anyway, take a look. I'm not sure. I'm interested in feedback. When have you switched? Has anybody out there switched control and instrumentation and automation suppliers or even software suppliers? That's difficult too. You can get in a little bit at a time. That's how actually my sponsor, Inductive Automation, that's how they did it. They had a good product. It was competitively good, better in some respects, the same as in other respects, but the pricing model just blew people away. And they started out years ago now, just a little bit at a time, getting into a plant and expanding and doing quite well. But for the bigger companies, not sure. It looks like a pretty stable, mature market to me. Some good competition going on. The open process automation group, part of the open group, has been moving along, and the threat was they could really disrupt the market. They're making really good progress, but it takes so long to do that. Meanwhile, all the competitors that are only paying lip service to OPAF, they'll be adopting a lot of those technologies anyway. And what I've discovered over many years is these big companies, and working with their big customers, will adopt enough to keep the big customers happy and keep on going. And it's really hard to displace them. So yeah, a little feedback is good. If you want to send me some notes at Gary at the manufacturingconnection.com. And have you switched? Are you considering switching? How did you switch? It would be interesting to see if there's some movement in the market, but last quite a few years, it's looking pretty stable. And I look at the magazines, I lived for a really long time in a small city that was dominated by a publishing house. It was hobbyist publications, but to me, it's the same idea. What's the health of that particular industry, that market they serve? And when amount of advertising goes down means the amount of competition, amount of new companies coming in, the companies that can afford advertising and support the magazines goes down. And take a look at the competitive magazines in the control and automation space. Software, manufacturing software magazines went away a long time ago, and the general ones, control engineering, automation world, Intech. Although Intech is an association magazine, but it still has to compete too. And you look at those and where the advertising is and who's advertising and what's going on, and it's difficult. And I think that shows once again a mature market, which has its good points and its bad points. For those of us working in it, it actually probably helps us to work in it. But just curious, what do you see? What's going on? Send me a little feedback if you want. Really interesting to know if anybody has done any switching over the last 4 or 5 years. Last 2 years with the pandemic, maybe not so much, but this last year, 2021, everybody's reporting really good numbers as far as sales and profits. So, maybe something's going on there. So a few thoughts on the market in control, instrumentation, automation. Nothing specific, but I can get more specific if you like, or you can take a look. I'm a strategic advisor with a German firm. There's a lot of stuff going on in Germany. And you can look at IoT Analytics company, and they've done a lot of research, and I do a little bit of advising with them and a little bit of research, and that's interesting too. So anyway, yeah, give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. Tell me if I'm all wet. Just a few few thoughts I was just throwing out about the state of the market and observations. And for what it's worth, then I'll follow up. And if it's worthwhile and I get any feedback, maybe I'll take a deeper look and look into some of the numbers. Anyway, it's another Gary on Manufacturing podcast. And this podcast is brought to you with the support of inductive automation. Discover a whole new view with Ignition 8 by Inductive Automation, packed with features for the modern control system like unlimited licensing, high-powered tags, and a mobile-first flexible design environment for all devices. Ignition 8 supports enterprises of any size. See all Ignition has to offer at inductiveautomation.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and go tackle a big problem.